usually that takes me to a new direction as well. So from each piece, I then go and play around with 3 different iterations of it. And then from each iteration, something new comes up. And usually that takes me to different directions. I studied architecture. And at the beginning, when I started working with clay, it was more because I was experimenting with different materials and I started playing with concrete, and then I transitioned into clay. The first years, all my work was very, very symmetrical and very straight lines. I was basically focusing on wheel throwing and I wanted everything to be symmetrical. So coming back to now, when I work primarily with coiling and everything is pretty asymmetrical. After my journey with wheel throwing, I think I started looking for a different way to kind of experiment more with forms. Coiling in particular, you don't need to follow the centrifugal force as much, so things can start becoming a little bit more complex in terms of shapes. So what happened is I made one coil pod just on the side. It was a very intuitive process, and I kind of just wanted to play around without having any expectations about the result as much as that's possible. And the thing that I started doing straight after was I would look into the form after it was fired. I looked at that first base, which I still have, and I observed what is it that I'm enjoying in this vessel and in this form, and what is it something that I would, if I could change it now, which obviously was too late, what would it be? So then I started thinking of a next piece which would replicate the things that I really liked about the first one, but change into what I would want the parts that I didn't like to be. So then each piece was a continuation. So that process, this is the 6th year, so it's been 350 forms now, but it's such a slow process, and I generally try to work on 5 or 6 pieces at the same time. Now I think there are a lot of examples of pieces that I still have made in the past that I need to go back to, and I want to focus a little bit on their curve and tweak it a little bit. So now it's all like a tree that I can go and play around with the branches and explore something new. In terms of the workshops and the way that they came about, slowly I started having this structure in my process where obviously I said earlier how I would try to replicate the part of the piece that I made before that I liked and change the part that I didn't. In reality, it was quite hard and challenging to copy paste the exact curve onto a new piece. And then it was also challenging to kind of take control of the curve that I wanted to create into a new form. So it might have been that in my mind, I knew exactly what I wanted to create, but then in reality, it took me a few times to try and build it with clay. I started having this kind of rules in terms of like how to move my fingers and how does that translate into the 3-dimensional world based on the curve that I was trying to achieve, basically. So that's what I'm also trying to pass on to you, essentially. Those rules that I have in my practice, which, just to say, is where you're finding me now. I'm hoping that in 10 years' time, there are going to be more tools added to my practice. But at the moment, I'm keen to show you exactly what it is that I'm doing and how it is translating. In terms of the timeline of the workshop and what we will try to aim, you're not just learning this one form, you're also able to learn some other ones that are a bit more simplified of what we will do. We will start building from the bottom, building up and out. And then when we change direction and try to close that form that has curved out for it to start coming in, that's the first tricky part in pottery in general, but like with coiling especially. Everything tends to become a shallow ball when you're building very much out, and it's quite tricky to start closing the form in. So that's the first challenge that we will encounter and go through, and then we will start closing the form in. And essentially, when you meet that waist level, we will, for the first time, start working in asymmetry. We will work on two different parts differently and cover asymmetry, which I then go and do in different forms as well. But I think that's just the tool of how you can start working on one side in one way, or another in another way. And also you can then go crazy and do that in like 4 different directions. So then we will start opening out towards the belly, and we will work on the belly. Essentially, you just build outward, down, before you start transitioning and start closing the form up and in again. And then we meet into a narrow neck. And it's a very classical way of finishing a vessel. I will be showing you each step, and then you will be following along, and then I will send you the recording on at the end of it as well. You don't need to keep up with any pace other than your own.